Today Margam Park and Castle is visited by many visitors each year. In 1898 it was owned by Miss Talbot when one of her gamekeepers was murdered. On the evening of the 8th of June 1898, Robert Scott, aged 39, the second gamekeeper to Miss Talbot, was shot and killed by poacher Joe Lewis on the mountain top at Margam. People described Robert Scott as having a very gentle and friendly nature. Robert Scott, accompanied by a young underkeeper, Robert Kidd, and Police Constable Horton, were investigating an area where gunshots had been heard on previous evenings. The three split up, having spotted a poacher in the distance. This poacher was armed with a double-barreled shotgun. Robert Scott was carrying a blackthorn stick. Gamekeepers at Margam were not allowed to carry weapons. Lewis had made for a gap in the dry stone wall. He was found and recognized by Robert Scott. Lewis then shot the keeper in the face. A second discharge in the shoulder killed him outright. This newspaper article showing a sketch of the scene states the poacher started from A to 1, where some stones had been knocked out of the wall. Robert Scott came from B, and sighting the poacher ran to the first X, whereas his face appeared in the gap in the wall. The poacher stopped at 1 and shot him. Robert Scott crawled onto the spot shown by the second cross and was again shot over the second gap. Robert Scott at the time of his murder had a wife, Margaret, and a 2-year-old boy. After hiding his gun, Lewis was seen by a number of estate workers, and spent the night in one of the now demolished Salt Lake houses nearby. It was Lewis's own talkativeness that made suspicion a certainty. He had apparently told his landlady that he had killed Robert Scott during a confrontation on the mountain. Newspapers made a number of reports on the murder at the time. Robert Scott was buried at Margam Abbey Church on the 13th of June 1898. Lewis was eventually arrested and charged with the murder of Robert Scott, and at his trial at Swansea's Guildhall, Lewis pleaded self-defense, maintaining that the second shot was an act of compassion to put him out of his misery. He was found guilty, and on the 30th of August 1898 he was hanged at Swansea Prison.